I wanted to show you what can happen sometimes when you're using technical pens and how they can be affected by the humidity level of your environment. Now, it's June, it's very humid today, and for some reason that affects the take-up of the ink sometimes. I have mixed my inks, I've filled the pens, I know they're clean, and I can't get them to start. And this has happened before. It can be frustrating, and that's why I'm making this video, because I don't want people that are just starting to use these pens think that this is something they're doing wrong or that it happens all the time. It has a lot to do with the humidity, and ink gets pulled up. I'll unscrew this nib and show you. Let me put it in the picture here. As I take out the nib, the ink is pulled up, but you can see that all of these threads, as they screw down into, there's my color, it's a lavender color for a flower, and that ink has to go up through those threads, even though it goes up on the inside. When you see these threads covered, the ink more or less has been pulled up. There's the weight at the bottom, and the ink actually goes up through there into the nib, but you can see that it's not even in the thread, so it's not coming up out of the reservoir. Now, the smaller point sizes, like the one I'm using now, and this will happen when you go to screw that back on, you'll have a little bit of an ink overflow. So I'm going to move away from my drawing so I don't get splatters all over it. But you can see all those bubbles and everything at the top now, and I just wipe those off, and there's my color on the rag. So what I'm doing to get the ink to start through the pen is I'm using the Kohinoor bulb syringes, and I squeeze the air out first, and I place it on the nib, and I let it sit there until this pops up. And especially with the smaller nib sizes, you may have to do that several times. Now, on this pen, I know this is not clogged. I had red in it a few minutes ago. Excuse me. And then I cleaned the pen and I put green in it. You can see the bulb syringe has popped. But because I cleaned this in an ultrasonic cleaner, what actually happened, you can see that, is that the cleaning solution goes up into the nib to clean the nib. And that is what is around the nib right now. In other words, it's doing the same thing as the other pen. The ink has not yet come up through the nib, even though the bulb syringe had popped out. So I'll do the same thing again, and you have to be careful when you squeeze a bulb syringe. If you have any ink in there at all, it'll bubble out and it'll drip on your drawing. So I place that on there, and you can see there is still suction working to bring the ink up. So the ink has not yet come up through the nib. Now, normally when I clean a pen and put the ink in, I have instant ink start. And like I said, sometimes the weather, for some reason, today is sunny, hot, and humid. And it's warm in the house, it's humid in the house. Other than that, that is when this seems to happen the most. So scientifically, I don't know the answer. But I do know that it happens often enough for me to tell people about it who may be just starting with pens, technical pens, and using pens that depend on a regular ink flow. Now, with both of these, without the bulb syringe on them, with both pens, I stood them up after I assembled them with the new ink in there. I stood them up in the ultrasonic cleaner, and a lot of times that will, just by the action, pull the ink down through the nib, and that didn't happen this time either. So these two pens, and any other colors I mix, are going to sit like this until the ink starts flowing. And it's just something that happens, and even though it's frustrating, you shouldn't let it deter you from using these pens.